Let me tell you something that many people misunderstand when they talk about power in international politics. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that power looks like dominance, dramatic victories, and decisive confrontations, where one side clearly defeats the other. We imagine strength as something loud and visible. It appears in the form of military strikes, bold speeches, and dramatic headlines declaring who won and who lost. In our minds, power resembles a sporting event where there must always be a champion standing proudly at the end. But in reality, power on the global stage rarely works that way. Real strategic power is often quiet, patient, and invisible. It does not always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like restraint, hesitation, or even retreat. And one of the clearest examples of this complex reality can be seen in the way Iran has navigated its long and dangerous position in the Middle East. When we step back from the emotional debates, the heated television discussions, and the endless political arguments that dominate the news cycle, we begin to notice something very different about Iran's behavior. Rather than rushing toward dramatic confrontation, Iran often appears to step back just when the situation seems to be reaching a climax. At first glance, that behavior can easily be interpreted as weakness. Critics often say it proves that Iran is afraid, that it cannot follow through on its ambitions, or that it lacks the courage to push its advantage. But if we analyze the situation through the lens of long-term strategy rather than short-term spectacle, a completely different picture begins to emerge. Iran may not be retreating because it is weak. It may be stepping back because it understands a fundamental truth of geopolitics. Survival is often more important than victory. In the complex world of international strategy, a state that survives difficult circumstances retains the ability to influence the future. A state that destroys itself in a reckless attempt at dominance loses everything. When decisions are measured not in days or months, but in decades, patience becomes one of the most powerful tools any nation can possess. To understand why Iran might prioritize survival over dramatic confrontation, we have to examine the strategic environment in which it operates. Iran does not exist in a peaceful or stable neighborhood. On its western border lies Iraq, a country that has experienced decades of war, invasion, and political instability. The effects of those conflicts have shaped the entire region and continue to influence security dynamics today. To the east lies Afghanistan, another nation that has struggled for decades with internal conflict and fragile governance. Neither of these neighbors offers Iran a stable or predictable security environment. To the south lies the Persian Gulf, one of the most strategically sensitive waterways in the world. A huge percentage of the global energy supply moves through that narrow region, which means powerful countries from across the globe have a strong interest in maintaining influence there. Around that same region are multiple states that view Iran with suspicion or hostility. Some compete with it for regional influence, while others actively work with external powers to limit its strategic reach. On top of this geographic pressure, Iran has faced decades of economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and covert operations aimed at weakening its capabilities. Its nuclear program has been targeted by cyber attacks, sabotage, and intelligence operations. Its economy has endured waves of restrictions designed to limit its access to international markets. And the possibility of military confrontation has been a constant presence in its strategic calculations. Any country operating under these conditions must confront a difficult decision. Should it escalate tensions and risk triggering a massive confrontation with stronger adversaries? Or should it manage pressure carefully while waiting for more favorable circumstances? This is the dilemma that strategists often call the survival dilemma. It forces leaders to think not about pride or dramatic victories, but about the long-term preservation of the state itself. Once a conflict escalates into full-scale war, control over the outcome becomes extremely uncertain. Wars develop their own momentum, and once they begin, it becomes almost impossible to predict how they will end. Timelines accelerate, alliances shift rapidly, and the consequences can become catastrophic for all sides involved. For a country like Iran, which faces adversaries with enormous military capabilities, a total war scenario could quickly eliminate many of the strategic advantages it currently possesses. Iran does have important strengths. It is geographically large, which makes invasion extremely difficult. Its population exceeds 80 million people, giving it substantial human resources and internal resilience. Over decades, it has invested heavily in asymmetric military capabilities designed specifically to complicate any attempt at direct military confrontation. These capabilities include missile forces, regional partnerships, and defensive strategies that raise the cost of aggression for potential enemies. In addition, Iran has built networks of influence across parts of the Middle East. Relationships with actors in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen provide it with strategic depth. These networks mean that Iran's influence extends beyond its own borders, making it a key factor in many regional conflicts and political developments. From a strategic perspective, this networked influence acts as a buffer that complicates the calculations of adversaries. However, these advantages function best in situations that remain below the threshold of total war. They are tools designed for a long strategic competition, not for a direct and overwhelming confrontation with the full military power of multiple adversaries. If tensions escalate into a massive war, many of these advantages could disappear very quickly. That is why Iranian strategists often appear to walk a narrow and careful line. They apply pressure when necessary but avoid pushing the situation so far that it triggers an uncontrollable escalation. They respond to threats, but often do so in ways that maintain ambiguity and flexibility. They demonstrate strength, but remain cautious about forcing opponents into a corner where those opponents might feel compelled to respond with overwhelming force. From the outside, this behavior can easily look like hesitation. Observers sometimes interpret restraint as weakness because they are expecting dramatic and immediate responses. But inside the logic of long-term strategy, restraint is often a sign of careful calculation. A country that rushes into confrontation may gain a temporary sense of satisfaction, but it also risks losing control of the situation entirely. Time is one of the most valuable resources in geopolitics. Over time, economies rise and fall, political systems evolve. Alliances that once seemed permanent begin to fracture under pressure. Technological innovations change the nature of warfare and reshape strategic advantages. Domestic politics inside powerful countries shift, sometimes creating unexpected opportunities for rivals. A state that manages to survive long enough may eventually find that the entire strategic environment has changed in its favor. What once looked like weakness can slowly transform into resilience. The country that avoided catastrophic mistakes may find itself in a stronger position simply because it endured while others exhausted themselves. Iran has already experienced something similar in its modern history. After the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the country entered a period of deep international isolation. Soon afterward, it was drawn into a devastating 8-year war with Iraq. That conflict caused enormous destruction and loss of life, and at the time many analysts believed Iran might not emerge from it as a stable state. During that war, Iraq received support from multiple external powers that feared the spread of revolutionary ideology in the region. Iran faced severe economic and military pressure, and yet it survived the conflict. Over the decades that followed, it gradually rebuilt its institutions, expanded its influence, and became a central player in Middle Eastern geopolitics. The fact that Iran still exists as a significant regional actor today is not because it achieved overwhelming victories in every conflict it faced. It is because it endured. Endurance is one of the quiet but powerful strategies used by states that cannot afford catastrophic defeat. Endurance often requires difficult choices. Leaders must sometimes abandon opportunities that appear attractive in the short term because pursuing them could expose the country to unacceptable long-term risks. They must accept compromises that appear humiliating in domestic political debates. They must slow down when emotions push toward escalation. Choosing survival over dramatic victory can be politically uncomfortable, but it is often strategically wise. A government that survives a difficult moment retains the ability to rebuild its strength, adjust its policies, and pursue its ambitions in the future. A government that collapses in a reckless confrontation loses all of those possibilities. This principle is not unique to Iran. It has appeared repeatedly throughout modern history. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union competed fiercely for global influence. Their rivalry involved ideological conflict, proxy wars, and intense political competition across multiple continents. Both sides possessed enormous nuclear arsenals capable of destroying the world many times over. Despite this hostility, the two superpowers avoided direct large-scale war with each other. They fought indirectly through conflicts in places such as Korea and Vietnam, but they remained careful to avoid a direct confrontation that could escalate into nuclear catastrophe. Their leaders understood that a total war between them would likely end in mutual destruction. As a result, both sides practiced a form of strategic restraint. They competed politically, economically, and technologically while managing the risks of escalation. They applied pressure carefully and waited for shifts in the global balance of power. Eventually, the Cold War ended not with a massive military clash, but with the gradual collapse of the Soviet system. In today's world, the global environment is once again changing rapidly. The rise of new economic powers, the shifting dynamics of global energy markets, and the increasing competition between major countries are reshaping international politics. The world that existed in the immediate decades after the Cold War is slowly transforming into a more complex and multipolar system. In such an environment, patience can become an extremely valuable strategy. A country that preserves its strength and avoids catastrophic mistakes may find itself in a stronger position as the global balance shifts. Instead of rushing toward confrontation, it may choose to wait while larger powers become distracted by their own rivalries and internal challenges. None of this means that Iran has abandoned its ambitions. Like many states, it seeks influence, security, and recognition in its region. Its leaders continue to pursue policies designed to protect their interests and expand their strategic options. What may have changed is not the objective but the timeline. Ambition guided by discipline often appears very different from ambition driven by emotion. It involves careful calculation, gradual movement, and a willingness to delay certain goals until conditions become more favorable. From the outside, such a strategy may look slow or cautious, but over time it can reshape the balance of power in subtle ways. Observers who focus only on dramatic events often miss these gradual changes. Geopolitics rarely moves in sudden, cinematic moments where everything changes overnight. Instead, it evolves through small adjustments, shifting alliances, and quiet strategic decisions that accumulate over many years. Sometimes the most important decision in history is not the decision to fight a battle, but the decision to avoid one. The choice to step back from confrontation, absorb pressure, and wait for a better opportunity can have consequences that echo for decades. If Iran has indeed chosen a strategy focused on survival and patience, that choice may shape the future of the Middle East in ways that are not immediately visible. A country that remains stable today retains the ability to influence the region tomorrow. In the long run, the most important question is not whether a country wins a single confrontation or dominates a single moment. The deeper question is whether it preserves its position, its capabilities, and its strategic options for the future. If it succeeds in doing that, what once appeared to be weakness may eventually be recognized as strategic patience. What seemed like hesitation may turn out to have been discipline, and what looked like stepping back from victory may one day be seen as the decision that made future victories possible. In geopolitics, patience can be a powerful and sometimes dangerous weapon. The state that waits carefully, preserves its strength, and adapts to changing circumstances often shapes the final outcome of long historical struggles. It may not dominate the headlines every day, but it remains standing long after louder rivals have exhausted themselves. That quiet logic of endurance is one of the most powerful forces in international politics. It reminds us that true power is not always measured by dramatic victories, but by the ability to survive, adapt, and influence the future long after the moment of crisis has passed.